Violence and vandalism. What 2 U.S. bishops are saying about the recent attacks on pro-life organizations. New law. Why one state felt it needed to pass a pro-abortion bill. Human trafficking. A leading pro-life congressman raises a key issue on Capitol Hill. And focus on the Middle East. Analysis of an important trip coming up for President Joe Biden. On EWTN News Nightly for Tuesday, June 14th, 2022. Thank you so much for being with us tonight. I'm Tracy Sable. The migration crisis at the U.S. southern border continues to be a national problem. A caravan of over 10,000 migrants recently disbanded after Mexico gave them temporary visas, but Republicans say they are still coming by the thousands. Capitol Hill correspondent Eric Rosales reports.
April was another month for these migrant encounters down at the southern border. More than 200,000 took place. Now, lawmakers say that many of these migrants have to pay back cartels by smuggling in drugs or even working in the sex industry. And they blame President Biden for allowing it to happen.
He has intentionally opened the border. Mayorkas, the Secretary of Homeland Security, is doing nothing to make this border secure. I mean, they stopped the wall, they stopped the technology, the lights and the cameras. They have less Border Patrol being able to do their job.
Senator Rick Scott adds the possibility that Title 42 could be overturned means even more migrants are making the trek.
The reason that there's a surge again in Tijuana is because the president essentially invited everyone over when he said we're going to repeal Title 42.
Congressman James Comer adds an unsecure border means terrorism threats to Americans and tells me the amount of drugs trafficked is showing up on American streets.
Bringing more fentanyl, bringing more human trafficking, and bringing more crime. The Democrats don't want to talk about that.
I think the engraved invitation that's out there today means that the propensity to exploit, especially young women, is off the charts. I mean, it's horrific.
Catholic Congressman Chris Smith, who heads up the pro-life caucus, is trying to get a bill reauthorized that may curb human trafficking. His bill, the Frederick Douglass Trafficking Victims Prevention and Protection Act, would provide $1 billion over 5 years to strengthen and expand counseling, fund other programs to protect victims, and prosecute criminals. The U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops would like to see some sort of immigration reform passed, allowing migrants a path to citizenship.
Border Patrol agents say morale is at an all-time low. A record number are calling out sick, many telling media outlets, quote, "What's the point? What does it matter?" At the Capitol, Eric Rosales, EWTN News Nightly.
And joining us now is Representative Chris Smith from New Jersey. Representative Smith, welcome back. Always great to see you. Talk to us more about this human trafficking bill and why you feel it's so important that it gets reauthorized.
Sure. As the author of the original Trafficking Victims Protection Act of 2000, which was our landmark law, this builds on those pillars of prevention, prosecution of the traffickers, and protection for the victims. So we have a number of new items in it, including housing, a significant amount of money that's dedicated to ensuring that those who have been trafficked and now have been rescued have the ability to live in a home or a rental apartment. And that makes a huge difference for them. There's a big emphasis on prevention to make sure that our young people are situationally aware so that they are not deceived into a trafficking situation, and usually after deception, drugs, and other ways to compel compliance is applied to them. And there are so many young girls and young women and young boys, too, who are being trafficked. So we need to make a whole generation of our young people, our students, no matter what schools they're in, private, public, whatever it is, aware. We have some curricula that can really be helpful in this regard. This takes it to a whole new level. And it also coming out of the pandemic, where we realized that grooming was a major, major problem online, to incorporate all of those lessons learned so that when people go online or they're on their phone, that they're not facilitated into a trafficking situation. So it's a very comprehensive bill. We've been working on it for months. and the Catholic Conference has been very, very helpful. The USCCB and the like have all been very, very helpful. So we're ready to get this on the floor. My hope and prayer is that it may be as early as next week.
Yeah, and I know that you've often said that you consider human trafficking really a pro-life issue. Tell us why you say that.
Sure. I do believe, I'm a very, very strong believer in protecting unborn children from the violence of abortion. And hopefully we'll get good news soon on reversal of Roe versus Wade, which just begins the whole fight now at the lawmaker level without the constitutional barrier hanging over our heads. But I do believe we need to be very consistent in caring for the least of our brethren, as we're told and admonished by Jesus himself in Matthew 25. Whatever we do to them, we do to him, our Lord. And I think, there are a lot of people who are vulnerable because, when we're talking about the least, we're talking about situationally, that because of a situation, whether it be drug use or age, vulnerability, being a young person, that's what the least is. We got to make sure that we are helping them. So I do believe that, right to life is the most paramount human rights issue on the face of the earth. But we also have to be responsive, and the church has been magnificent in that consistency ethic. I do believe caring for the babies is paramount. 63.5 million unborn babies killed since Roe versus Wade by decapitation and chemical poisoning, just horrific methods, and the women who are the co-victims of every abortion. But we need to look in other areas as well and say, there too goes someone who is vulnerable, and we need to always care for the weakest and most vulnerable. And that's what this bill seeks to do, to take us to the next level on prevention, on prosecution of the traffickers, and on protection for the victims themselves.
If you don't mind, for those who may be not that familiar, with human trafficking, kind of give us a scope of how big of an issue this is right now, especially here in the U.S.
Oh, great question. There's all kinds of estimates, but 25, 30 million people all over the world, labor and sex trafficking, being 5+ million. Nobody knows the exact number, but it's right in our backyard. There's a sense of entitlement that some guys have, especially, where they don't care that the woman has been turned into a commodity for sale. And I think there needs to be a great deal more education to the men and the young men especially about the cruelty of what these women go through. My wife and I have met with many trafficking victims over the years and have been moved to tears by their witnesses. So the definition of a trafficking victim is any commercial sex with any woman who has not attained the age of 18, and after the age of 18, where there is an element of force, fraud, or coercion. So and with labor trafficking, obviously it's similar. And again, you look all around the world with the sweatshops. You look at China with the genocide being committed against the Uyghurs. They use concentration camps every day of the week to make goods that are then exported to the United States, often transshipped through other countries like Vietnam. And they're doing it right now with solar panels pursuant to a brand new executive order by President Biden. Shameless executive order. To bypass an important law that goes into effect on June 21st, and I'm one of the authors of it, to make sure that nothing coming out of the genocide-laden area called Xinjiang in China goes to our markets. He now has provided a huge exception for solar panels and solar products, for solar energy, and for 24 months with no tariffs whatsoever on those products. It's shameless in my opinion, but he just did it on June 6th.
Well, thank you so much for bringing that up. That's really important to know, and so much more we could talk about. Unfortunately, we're out of time, but thank you for your time, Representative Smith. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me on. Please. Thank you.
Two U.S. bishops are asking for an end to the attacks on Catholic churches and pro-life pregnancy centers. Cardinal Timothy Dolan of New York and Archbishop William Lori of Baltimore want elected officials to take a strong stand against the vandalism. The bishops observe that motives for some of the recent attacks are, quote, often opposition to the church's teachings on life in the womb. Meanwhile, New York's Catholic governor has signed new laws to protect abortion.
The women of New York will never be subjugated to government-mandated pregnancies, because that's what will ensue if Roe v. Wade is overturned by the Supreme Court.
One measure protects out-of-state residents who receive abortions in New York. The other blocks authorities in New York from enforcement of out-of-state laws which hold providers accountable through civil or criminal penalties. The White House braces for the upcoming Supreme Court decision that could overturn Roe versus Wade. Vice President Kamala Harris held a roundtable today to discuss what's at stake.
But I do believe that we should prepare for the right to privacy to be attacked and under attack with this decision.
The vice president met with people who support the administration's pro-abortion policies. But Susan B. Anthony, Pro-Life America, blasts the Democrats, writing, "The party now demands abortion on demand up until the moment of birth, paid for by the taxpayer." On the other hand, Republicans face pressure from President Joe Biden.
Really ask yourself, how are you going to sleep at night knowing that every 5 years, Ted Cruz and the other ultra-MAGA Republicans are going to vote on whether you'll have Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid?
Senator Ted Cruz fights back, accusing the president of putting America on a path to recession. The stock market and associated retirement accounts have suffered serious losses in the last year. Coming up, trip to the Middle East. President Joe Biden reveals which countries he's going to visit next month. Plus, what the Pope is saying about the ongoing war in Ukraine. President Joe Biden will travel to the Middle East next month. He is slated to visit Israel, the West Bank, and Saudi Arabia. While in Saudi Arabia, the president will attend the GCC+3 summit, bringing together 9 heads of states. White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre says Saudi Arabia has been a strategic partner with America for nearly 8 decades. And joining me now is Clare Lopez, founder and president of Lopez Liberty LLC. Clare, great to see you again. Let's talk about this upcoming trip to the Middle East. During his campaign, then candidate Biden was really quite critical of Saudi Arabia and its leadership. But now the Biden administration seems willing to work with the country. I'd like to get your thoughts on that and what you expect from this upcoming trip.
Well, I think the main reason for the change in U.S. policy under the Biden administration vis-a-vis Saudi Arabia is, of course, our energy crisis here in America, where the Biden administration is completely unwilling to remove restrictions and regulations that would open up energy production here at home, but now is ready to go to other places like Saudi Arabia to ask them to increase oil production.
And Clare, let's talk about that, especially when it pertains to our own national security. Well,
the situation of being energy dependent again, as you know, opposed to the situation that President Donald Trump left us in, which was to be energy independent. It's a very big change. And regarding U.S. national security, if we are dependent on other nations, be they partners, allies, or adversaries, like Venezuela, for example, like Russia, for example, adversaries, that puts U.S. national security at a distinct disadvantage as regards national security, it seems to me.
Yeah, and as mentioned, President Biden will also visit Israel and the West Bank to meet with the Palestinian Authority. What, if anything, do you think will be achieved by those meetings?
Well, I don't know that very much will be achieved. We know that the Biden administration is hoping to open some kind of a new direct Palestinian office or Office for Palestinian Affairs in Israel. Even after the Israelis have turned down any thought of opening a separate consulate or a separate diplomatic facility for a direct U.S. to Ramallah relations, because under the Trump administration, of course, the United States moved our embassy to Jerusalem, the one and only undivided eternal capital of the Jewish state of Israel. And so the Biden administration seems to be trying to kind of get around that. So I don't know that very much will be accomplished on the Israel part of the trip or the part in Ramallah.
On a different note, Claire, but staying in the Middle East, as we know, Iran is moving 27 cameras, removing that is, that are used by the International Atomic Energy Agency in order to monitor the country's nuclear sites. Let's talk about the tension that this move is creating.
Right. Well, this comes in the very same week when the IAEA announced essentially that there is no more breakout time for the Iranian nuclear weapons program. The breakout time is now 0. And in that very same week, we get the report, as you mentioned, that the Iranians have disabled or disconnected cameras. These are both at the Natanz and the Fordo nuclear enrichment sites, leaving the IAEA essentially blind without being able to monitor what is going on inside of those enrichment facilities, particularly, for example, as regards the installment of newer, better, faster, newer generation centrifuges, for example.
And we have a little bit less than a minute left or so, Claire, but I want to talk about Russia and Ukraine now. Russia is continuing its attacks, honing in on the eastern Ukraine. Can you talk the strategy behind that, and how much longer do you think this war will go on?
You know, sadly for the Ukrainian people, it could go on for quite a while. What's happening now is that the Russians are back to probably what was their original and core objective for this invasion in the first place back in February of this year, and that was the complete conquest of the Donbas, consisting of 2 oblasts, Luhansk and Donetsk. And the current offensive is basically an artillery slugfest, particularly focused on the remaining holdout city of Severodonetsk in northern Luhansk Oblast. And if they achieve that, the Russians achieve the fall of that city into their hands, they will essentially control a very good part of the Donbas, which was their original objective.
Well, Claire, we're going to leave it right there. Thank you so much, as always, for your analysis. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you.
At least 55 people were killed over the weekend in Burkina Faso. Authorities say gunmen from ISIS are to blame. Attacks linked to ISIS have soared in the West African nation. The government is asking citizens to remain united in the fight against the insurgents. An expert says Nigerian Christians no longer view the United States as, quote, a credible partner. The American lawyer who fights for persecuted faithful in the country says the U.S. will not try to make their situation better. He adds that despite facing many threats, Christians in the West African country continue to live joyfully. And for more in the comments at a National Review Institute event, visit our partners at CatholicNewsAgency.com. Pope Francis says the Russian troops in Ukraine have been ferocious and cruel. In a magazine article published today, the Holy Father also called the people of Ukraine courageous. But he added, quote, there are no good guys and bad guys in the military conflict. And in some ways, the Kremlin was provoked into action by NATO's expansion. Filipinos near Manila are unhappy about increased gas prices. These protesters are expressing discontent as local prices have climbed to an average near $5.75 converted to U.S. numbers. That marks an increase of 55% compared to a year ago. By comparison, prices in the U.S. have increased an estimated 46%. Up next, life after COVID. How a Catholic women's group is ministering to people in Latin America. A new report says 196 priests in one diocese in Germany were credibly accused of sexually abusing minors. The probe into the Diocese of Munster examines allegations between the years 1945 and 2020. The diocese is expected to release a statement later this week. Finally, tonight, a group representing nearly 100 Catholic women's organizations from around the world recently met with Vatican officials. The World Union of Catholic Women's Organizations aims to give visibility to women, especially the most vulnerable. This international conference in Rome was focused on the impact of the coronavirus pandemic and included a talk from Cardinal Mark Willett. The World Union was founded back in 1910 and is based in Rome. Joining us now from Rome is Monica Santa-Marina, Treasurer General for the World Union of Catholic Women's Organizations. Monica, great to be with you. Thank you for your time. If you don't mind, can you tell us more about your organization and especially the work that it does in Latin America and Africa?
Okay, we're an international public association of the faithful. We have we gather around near 100 organizations around the world. We are divided in 5 regions: Latin America, the Caribbean, Africa, Asia Pacific, Europe, and North America. We've been we have more than 100 years of work, and really our aim is to promote the presence, participation, and co-responsibility of Catholic women around the world in order to help them fulfill their responsibilities in the evangelization and human development of society and church.
I understand today that you presented a report on the impact of COVID-19 on women in Latin America and the Caribbean. If you don't mind, can you talk about that?
We've known that the principal effect of COVID-19 in women was that the holistic effect was that the big difference there were economic, social, structural differences between men and women grew more. The inequalities grew much more than they were before the pandemic. Now we have more violence against women. Now we have more feminization of poverty. Now we have less opportunities of going to the health services. Now the difference between the opportunities of education and home office, for example, for women that are not technically prepared have deepened. So that is what really worries us. There are many issues, many inequalities that have grown. They existed, but now they are worsened.
Monica, before I let you go, I know you recently met with Pope Francis. Tell us about that and what the Holy Father shared with you.
It was a great gathering. We were very glad to see that he was in a very good mood. He was even, making jokes. He told us, of course, that we needed. He gave us a lot of examples of women that are now in high places in the Vatican, and that are, developing a lot of functions, how the church is being open to all the women. He asked us to be courageous, to work more. He was very happy to know about this observatory. He encouraged us to go on, and he spoke also a lot about the Petrine line and the Marian line of the difference between men and women in church, how they are co-responsible, how they have, of course, the same rights, but different missions. And he spoke a lot about those different missions, both the same importance. As he said, the church is women as feminine, and so both missions are very important, and we need to collaborate.
Yeah. And Monica, thank you so much for speaking to us about all of this and for what you do. Monica Santa-Marina, Treasurer General at the World Union of Catholic Women's Organizations. Thank you again. And we thank you for watching tonight. For the entire EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Tracy Sable. Good night and God bless.